Hello and welcome to Just Play Tabletop Wargaming. In today's episode, we're going to tell you the top 5 armies that you will need to beat when returning to Age of Sigmar Tournaments in 2021. But look guys, if you do like this video, please give us a like. And if you want to see more content from us, just hit that subscribe button and you can keep up to date with everything we've got going on. Plus, of course, please support us. We've got a great hobby store. We sell a huge range of Games Workshop products, hobby supplies. You can pick them all up at justplaygames.uk. So, Ian, first army that we are going to say that you need to beat when returning to tournaments in Age of Sigmar in 2021 is...
Great. Absolutely no surprise to anyone whatsoever, Idoneth Deepkin.
Yeah.
So, Idoneth Deepkin, what can you say about them? They're really fast. They fly. They're super consistent. They re-roll everything. They've got one unit which is, almost inarguably the best unit in the game for its points and has somehow consistently escaped nerfs since it was released, other than that random 10.1 that it got once.
I know the units went down, so it didn't make a difference at that point.
Yeah, exactly. In Achillean Morsar Guard. So, super good army that is just really good at playing the game the way it's played, objectives-wise, and taking out key units and everything else. And they've got tons of options. Obviously, they always strike first, which is a little bit of an artifact from the past now that a lot of armies have struggles beating. They've got anti-shooting tech built in, which, shooting meta right now particularly, which is good. And they've also, during lockdown, they've had a bunch of buffs and big changes to units that were never played before. So it's still questionable whether those units will even see play just because of how good, Morsar Guard are. But undoubtedly, the army now has even more options, even more ways to attack the meta, change it up, do different things. Shark stopping things piling in is like another way that Idoneth Deepkin can fight where in an unfair way where you can't. And the turtle now is very good. The Achillean Leviathan, and has got the +1 save bubble is super good and stacks with their cover ability on turn 1. So they've got loads of ways to interact with everything, as they always have. They've maybe got even better since we last played, and we've always considered them S tier, and they still are. Plus, popular army, loads of people own them already because they've been out for such a long time. Very popular hobby project army, which is a lot of the armies we're going to see on tables soon are going to be ones people have picked up as projects during lockdown. So you're going to see these a lot, and they're super good.
Yeah, man, you've nailed it at the end for me there. These have always been S tier. Anybody who's a tournament regular, it becomes no surprise to you that Idoneth Deepkin have always been an army to beat. But their popularity hasn't always been there. Now, I think with the stuff that you've talked about, Broken Realms Marathi coming out, and that it's weird to say that, like, the army that was probably the best got a buff, right? It's just mad, isn't it? But it was coming from the right place, wasn't it? There was a great range of models, and some of the really, really show-off pieces, the shark and the turtle, they weren't seeing play, so they've made them better. And I think that, how you touch on the hobby side of things, is going to make these more prevalent on the table now. I think people don't have to take just eels, right? They can take whatever combination of models they want, and you're still going to have to respect what's across from you at the start of the table. Yeah. Will it be the most optimal list that the top players take time and time again? It might not be, but what it's going to have, sharks, they're amazing. It's going to have eels, they're amazing, right? It's going to have a turtle, it's amazing. And the shooting point is just unreal. You're having to shoot the closest target when you've just talked about +2 save on units. They've got units that can't be rendered, depending on what the meta looks like afterwards. And when we come out of tournaments and where the Deepkin players think they are, if they've got a couple of units of those unrenderable eels, then it's going to be really hard.
If you're running a turtle in your army and it's turn 1, you've got cover, you're not flipping the tides. Them Achillean Guards are a 2+ unrenderable save, and just one unit of them for 140 points for 3 of them in front of your army is like, go on, go crazy. Yeah,
and you got the Cloud of Midnight play, which is the popular one as well.
You
can pop that, and he can't be removed there. The Storm, we didn't talk about the Storm,
Of course, another model that I think it's questionable whether it'll even see play, but in almost every other army in the game, it would definitely see play because it's very, very powerful. You know, there's tons of ways. Again, you know, this list, this is not a tier list that we're talking about here. This is not a list of the top 5 armies in the game by power level. This is the top 5 armies you're going to have to beat. And whatever incarnation you play Deepkin in, whether it's mid-tables, you know, or people who aren't that experienced competitively, they're going to be powerful and they're going to be popular. So you're going to have to be able to deal with that maybe more often than you would be used to dealing with it pre-lockdown.
I think that's the key thing. For me, these are going to be, surely they're just going to be all over the tables. You know, people showing off these amazing armies. And if you've brought, you know, like one of these top shooting meta armies, and, you know, you run across a guy, you know, who maybe has just got an amazing hobby project Deepkin army, he's gonna challenge you.
He'll give you a run for your money.
Yeah. I think like nearly all the units are fair to be played in this book now as well.
Yeah,
it's just they're an incredible army. They're going to be all over the tables.
Yeah. Also, you know, the option to null deploy is also voids the things that a lot of other armies do as well. Or or to backline because you're so fast or whatever. You know, all them options around how you deal with the shooting armies that aren't just being hard to shoot, or how you deal with the magic armies just by not being there.
Yeah,
when they're casting their spells. Yeah, to do so much anyway. Deepkin, definitely an army to beat. Bring your screens out. Make sure you've got, you're going to need deep screens. You're going to need the ability to fend off being charged, and you're going to need the ability to catch very fast things.
Yeah. Good points. Okay, so next up is another big favorite for yourself. That is the Seraphon.
Seraphon, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I guess there's a bit of a joke if you follow me on Twitter, or if you have ever listened to our podcast. You know, I didn't and still don't rate Seraphon as highly as a lot of people do. But for the point we're making, what we're talking about in this episode, that is actually irrelevant. The point is that people do rate Seraphon very highly, and they are a very popular army. They're a very easy army to play powerful as well. I mean, you know, in the standard incarnation, which is basically Lord Croak, some buffs for Lord Croak, a bunch of skinks, some buffs for skinks, and then maybe some toys to put, you know, maybe you got some salamanders in there or whatever, depending on what flavor you like.
Usually
it's a very easy army to play. You know, you stick a bunch of bodies on the board, you move them forward, you throw spears or blow darts at people, and Croak sets up in his little fortress with his mates and just mortals everything. Very, very simple army to play. My opinion, one of the reasons it's so powerful on TTS in particular is because it's a very simple army to play. And you know, TTS definitely might be doing it a disservice, but definitely lends itself to armies that require less precise play, because that's a lot harder on TTS. You know, it's the equivalent to just setting up and shooting everything. So again, but my opinions on that aside, very
with a lot of bodies as well, which is nice, isn't it? So
always a good thing.
80 models on the board or whatever. Well, probably 100. But
undoubtedly, undeniably, a very powerful army, regardless of how powerful you think it is.
Yes,
and a very, very hyped army as well. And you know, always been quite popular, Seraphon as well, despite the models being so old. So again, another reason you are going to see these on the table a lot, and you are going to have to bring away to deal with lots of mortal wounds, and or magic hitting you on turn one.
Yeah. Do you think it's fair to say as well that outside of, let's say, a cookie cutter list like you've just sort of mentioned, the faction is also quite deep in having good stuff, from the point of view that, like, people have got lots of different models in the collections as well, and we want to put those on the board. You know, I think there's a lot of ways to play them outside that, hasn't it? It is a very good book, isn't it, Ian? You know, it's got a lot of ways to play that are all
it's
all competitive, really. Yes,
reasonably well internally balanced book. Yeah, I mean, you know, you've got options on like playing the dinosaur style lists, and again, these aren't as powerful as the Croak list, undeniably, but you've got options on like the dinosaur style list, which are still good. They do still shoot. They're quite tough. They can put decent amount of bodies on the board if they want to, and you've also got, you know, like Bloxosauruses that are really hard to kill. They fly, and all these things can also be backed up by Croak doing similar stuff as well. So again, like with the Deepkin. And you know, and like you say in there earlier, is that even if you don't have to play the absolute, what might be the best list, there's still going to be a good chance you're going to run into these. So you're going to it's going to be a good idea to prepare for running into things that have got -1 flat damage across their army. You know, if ogres were a good choice right now, they might not be a good choice in the meta because they're very reliant on 2 damage attacks, which is bad against Seraphon. You've got to have a way of dealing with a horde of bodies with ranged weapons, regardless of whether it's in that list or not. So yeah, definitely an army you're going to see a lot again for power and popularity reasons, and something you should definitely be prepared for its various incarnations of.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't half agree with that. I think it's a powerful army, got lots of different ways to play. And I think it'll be around for a long time, no matter what they do to it as well, really. I think even if, people did feel that some ways of it to play were too strong, I think it's got a lot of ways it can carry on playing. And I like your point about being able to go into like -1 damage if, there was an army that was pushing that sort of theme a lot. It's really croaking maybe some of the bound endless spells that I feel are a little bit out of whack, really. But otherwise, it's a solid army thing.
For me, it's a similar thing that people who've maybe not followed the podcast for a long time won't know. But something we've always said is it's not necessarily Kroak's amount of mortal wounds he can output. It's the fact that he can do it at such a big range. And much like shooting, the problem isn't necessarily how much damage the shooting does. It's the fact that it's just non-interactive. And, just puts a lot of armies that just want to fight in melee, which is a lot of what fantasy is about, just in a situation where they don't really have anything to do other than walk up the board.
Yeah, so I think the lists tick all the boxes very quick. They can afford enough threats. They can afford enough models. They can play in every phase of the game as well. And they can teleport everywhere. So it just all the things, if you were like building a list and you were thinking, I want these things in it, for me, tick, 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 tick with this army. So, I don't maybe think they do anything too broken. I think they just get everything together, I think it plays reasonably, honestly.
One of the things I find crazy is how much people talk about skinks and their crazy mortal wound output and all this kind of stuff. And when you do the maths on them, their output isn't actually that good. It's not even that good for the points that you invest by the time you add in the character and the skinks, but it's enough. Yeah, it's enough to constantly put pressure on, and they are mortals, which means that people that rely on high saves, lower wound count, do get punished by it more than normal attacks.
And they're a little bit harder to take off the board, aren't they? With the retreat.
Yeah, and the Fangs of Sotek ability letting you shoot stuff when it comes in to attack you, even if you fail your 4+ to run away, you at least get to kill more models. So, it's very attritional on top of all the damage that Kroaks do and everything as well. So, yeah, undoubtedly powerful and can flex a lot to do what it needs to do.
Yeah. So next, it's Lumineth Realmlords. Now, Lumineth Realmlords, for me, are an army that I think are going to be extremely popular through a lot of the reasons that we're repeating. Hobby-wise, they're a very nice army, very interesting. They've got a big range of models now. They're adding a hell of a lot more to their range. But I think the most important thing is good players like this army because it gives them lots of options and things to do. A saying we use quite a lot is just to feel clever, don't you, when you're playing it? But it plays every part of the game. It has lots of different ways it can play, and it does reward you for being good at the game. And I know, because obviously I mix in those circles, that people are attracted to this army for those reasons, and a lot of good players are going to play it. What do you think, E?
Yeah, I think, personally, when we've been reviewing books and things recently, I've had to hold back from comparing units in some books to units in Lumineth, because as well as everything they do that you've just said, they are also very aggressively pointed, to put it kindly. They're straight up underpointed in a lot of cases, and not in all cases. I think like the archers, for example, which give the army a capability that is really not seen anywhere else in the game, just in a unit that can just do mortals from so far away, uncontested in a way you can't stop it. But for the cost of them, they're actually sort of fair for what they do, which makes some other archers that cost even more look very bad in comparison, like the new Bliss Barb archers. But so a lot of the things that Lumineth do are just very cheap for their points. Like the cavalry, for example, are a great example for me of one of the first times I think the designers have got cavalry right. We talk about our cavalry just being so overpointed for their costs, and in the case of eels, underpointed for what they do. But their cavalry are
mostly for one reason, that movement stat.
Yeah, exactly. These cavalry are fast, they're tough enough, and they are good in combat, particularly on the charge. And they're fine at 130 points. So I don't think Lumineth put too much stuff on the board, but they do get a lot of options out of them. Mages in every unit, coverage of spells. A lot of feel clever things with what spells you put where and then how you use them during the game. But the big thing for me that they've got
reward in that, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and it's a thing that even good players often in list design really do half-ass. They rarely do say, I'm just going to throw these spells. People don't, here and there, they don't really think about what spells they're putting where and what impact that might have during the game. And there's a lot of opportunities to do that in Lumineth list build.
And you said then maybe they don't have that much stuff, but everything they've got is good. All their units on their board are threats, aren't they? They can all, do the work in combat with the wardens. The shooting really does the shooting. It ties in so well. All around, maybe one really big piece. Teclis,
right? Yeah. My opinion, Teclis is the thing that makes the army genuinely good. If you took Teclis out of it, and you look at the other things that the army does, it does lots of powerful things. It's got the Cathalar.
Definitely put a good list on the board.
Yeah, it's got the cow giants with it's got Avalanor with the -1 to hit, or it's got loads of good stuff. But I don't think it would be as good as it is without Teclis. And the main reason being, he shuts down magic, and he does it in two ways. He can either let you cast all of your spells and just mortal yourself, or he can just dispel the spells. And the spells he casts, not only can he force through spells if he really needs to, or he's very consistent with his spell casting, but the spell laws in the book also are absolutely incredible.
And because everyone's a wizard, you get redundancy on them as well. It's just
exactly. You can get them whenever you need. The effects, the debuffs on them, the speed debuffs, and his protection of Teclis 5+ massive ward save bubble. Everything he does just shuts down enemy casting very hard, and this is a thing that will be particularly bad for Seraphon. I imagine Teclis is a really good choice right now, just for Seraphon, if nothing else, because puts you in a very good position in that game. But yeah, just generally, I mean, he's just super powerful, and when you wrap up everything it does, it's
works
just
both ways that as well, doesn't it? That interaction, I think the Croak against Teclis is interesting as well, because he gets to unbind from any range, doesn't he? Because Teclis having that 4 spells, 2 spells, 1 spell thing is just so good, so consistent. His auto unbind, interrupts a combo on the other side of the board really easily. What a miniature. And we're about to enter into the unknown, where there's a whole bunch more stuff that we don't know what any of that does yet as well.
Yeah, and this is just with their existing book. They're about to double the size of the range by the looks of it. They're about to get mounted archers, which even mounted archers with questionable stats, as we talked about in the Slanesh book, are an incredibly powerful tool. They're about to get another combat unit, which I think you can argue, although the combat units they've got are fantastic. Again, if you took Teclis out the equation, would the 2 combat units that they have right now be good enough for their points in terms of models you're getting on the board? I'm not 100% sure, but they're getting Sword Masters now, which are almost certainly going to be very good.
That's because of the 5+ save that he brings. Is that why you think the units are improved so much? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I do think the units are very good, but again, even when units are very good, if they're very expensive, it's always questionable how good they can really be. You look at great swords in Cities of Sigmar are insane on paper for what they do, but they're still 140 points for 10 models with a 4+ save, which is not very survivable, particularly when you start running up against things like Croak or just things with good rend or a lot of attacks. And no matter what your raw damage and other stats are, survivability is always the #1 most important stat. And I think without that, the extra from Teclis, I just don't think you have enough in Lumineth. And I do think the tier of this army drops massively if you want to try to not play Teclis as well, personally.
Okay.
I think he makes the army work. But either way,
I think that could change a lot with the amount of new heroes we've seen added in this new range as well, isn't it? Before there was nothing after Teclis. It was, like you say, a Cathar with a nice trick, but now probably got some fighting guys, more wizards, bow hero. So
more battalions, undoubtedly. Yeah.
And I think to labour the point I said about Seraphon again, is I think these will be around for a long time for some different reasons, though. I think Games Workshop probably like this army. I'm sure
they're very pushed army. Very heavily pushed army.
Sure, they sell a lot of it. It's got a whole big new range coming out already, which people have not been that keen on, but it's come out very quick, load of new rules for them. Lumineth are going to be the next army I'm going to play. I've been sort of concerned about where I want to go with an army for a while, and I had some styles in what I wanted to paint, but the point, these will be around for a long time. Games Extra will back them. They're going to be top tier for a long time, and I want an army that I know I'll be able to play for a long time. I think that's important for people who go into tournaments as well. Yeah. Something they can invest in, something they can play for a long time, something that there's probably quite a few different builds and different ways to play it. So these are going to be a really popular army.
Yeah, they're going to be everywhere. And we've seen, you only have to look at any social media, how many people have bought this, how many people are playing this. Clearly not something that's translated to TTS, clearly not like the same level, but yeah, a lot of people are going to be playing this in real life at all levels. And you're going to see a lot of it on the table. And, again, you have that problem where if someone brings Teclis, maybe you're a better player, maybe you've got a better army, but if you bring a magic-based army and someone plops Teclis down, all of a sudden you're playing a few 100 points down for that game. It can wildly swing it. So it's really important that you consider, do I want to bother investing points into spellcasters, endless spells, all this kind of stuff in my army? And I think for me right now, I will definitely not be wanting to play armies for the foreseeable future that have any magic in them whatsoever, or that certainly not that rely on magic, but even that invest any points into magic because of Teclis, but also because of Croak as well. On top of that, just with them infinite range unbinds. So I think that's a takeaway from the two of those armies there.
All right, so we've done 3. We've got 2 more to go so far. Thanks so much for watching so far. If you have enjoyed it, give us a like. And more importantly, we've really loved engaging with you guys in the comments as well. So tell us what army you're going to play when tournaments return in 2021. Are you going to be playing one of these armies? Are you going to be playing one of the existing ones that you've already got?
Do you think these are the top 5 armies to beat as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. We've got 2 more to go. How are we doing so far? Let's see. Little less obvious now. We're getting into some. Those 3 were really, really the most.
I think they should have been obvious to most people.
They're going to be on everybody's list, aren't they? Number 4, though, Daughters of Khaine. So, Daughters of Khaine have not been on the scene for a little bit. They dominated a lot. They were a really popular army with a really high win percentage and really dominated. They've dropped off a little bit for no good reason, besides people just didn't fancy playing them anymore, right?
They were older. They got same as Deepkin. They've been played a lot. Lots of people did well with them, and people moved on to other armies.
Yeah, people wanted a new challenge, wanted to win in different ways. Wanted that reward for when you're a top player. You want to try and do something a little bit different sometimes, don't you? Want to play different armies. You're just playing, or you're just going to tournaments a lot. Some people, I go once a month maybe, and there's people who go twice that, right? So people don't want to play the same army all the time, so they move on to different things. Now, Daughters of Khaine have had the new battle tome out. It has took, no nerfs, really. It's been brought in line with some of the more common rules now that are out there. And it's had some big points drops as well. And it's had more of its units made more playable between Broken Realms, Marathi, and this book coming out. So I think a lot of the things that we've said already about Deepkin apply here. Loads of new ways to play them. Still super powerful. I think we're going to see these everywhere, and I think they will dominate once again. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I mean, the book did not realistically have any nerfs in it, so the only slight changes. Your Hagnar save doesn't affect mortal wounds anymore, but Hagnar are probably still the default temple still. But Kharadron is a little bit better and works a little bit better now. -1 against shooting is really great. And they've got the other new temple that is just straight up makes you even more of a killer in combat as well. So they've got more options, able to better flex to the meta, or to better support the models in the army that are good in the meta at a given time. And then obviously, yeah, you know, things they used to be an army that was pretty much some number of sisters that were quite hard to kill, maybe some Kinnerite to take some back objectives, and they were going to have a fight. But now they've got this whole shooting dimension as well.
Yeah.
On top of that, you know, they've got these super powerful shooting units. They've got ways to buff them easily. They've got ways to make them shoot in the hero phase, which is always like silly good, powerful when you can put big units together. So they got loads of options now that they didn't have before. Marathi's obviously been buffed overall since we were last playing on the tabletop as well. And although she's definitely not an auto include the way Teclis is, she does a thing that people often just can't deal with as well, which just makes it very powerful. So they got all these options. They can be melee, they can be shooting, they can do all of it at once as well if they want to. They can take the shooting block and the melee, and they can flex components of their armies based on the method as well. And you know, and just simply just new book syndrome as well. It's a very new book. It's going to be one of the most recent, probably 3 books or something by the time we start playing again, and people will want to be playing it. It's also a popular hobby army as well. I find, even though it's I think a very daunting army to paint because of the amount of models and the amount of flesh, maybe brought down a bit by the fact snakes are a bit easier to paint and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can take different models now.
Yeah, tons of people painting this. Lots of people bought the what was the box set, Shadow and Pain box set as well. Yeah. It's another thing that's happened during lockdown, which has meant a lot of people have picked up the models for this army, and then the books have come out, so now they're going to build on that and want to put it on the table. So for reasons of power and also for reasons of popularity, like everything else on this list, you're going to see these on the table. You're going to have to beat them, and they're very good.
Yeah, they've had the Khaine Shadow Stalkers added to the army as well, which has given them that every turn teleporting threat, be everywhere, taking objectives off you. I also think the army, there's a lot of points drops on, you know, cauldrons and a lot of the other characters in the army, wasn't there? And I think Games Workshop envision this army having Morathi in it. I think the points are dropped in some of the other areas to make sure you can have Morathi, the units, and that other buff piece you want now. You know, it just not enough of a drop for that. But like you said, do you think, again, people will play this without Morathi, you know, and I think obviously that's going to be, you know, maybe a lot of snakes or lots of cauldrons, you know, wherever you get a lot of points back in 600 points, don't you? So I think she will ultimately be the way they're played the most. But again, I'm really interested to see what armies from this book end up on the table, because I think there's a lot of options as well, and I can't wait to see which way people gravitate to. So these are an army with a lot of units, a lot of different ways to play. I think you're going to be threatened all over the board from lots of different angles from these. So particularly Morathi, you know, the most, you know, one of the most unique models in the game, right? You know, with how she can't die, so brings that unique threat as well.
Yeah,
so.
now she can't die even more than previously with the tweaks to her rules. Yeah, very good.
So the final army we've picked was my favorite, the Kharadron Overlords. Now, we've definitely not picked these because they're my favorite. We actually don't think these are, say, on the same tier as maybe the other 4, maybe particularly Idoneth or Seraphon. I think that they are quite hard to play very well. And if your opponent is really, really clued up on the army, there's a lot of ways they know, little simple things they can do to beat you. That said, they're a very polar army. They got a lot of shooting. They can put it anywhere they want, anywhere on the board. They're an army that is popular and is proved to be very popular in other parts of the world who have been lucky enough to carry on playing. It's had a hell of a lot of success over there. Australia particularly, they've done really well. It's won a lot of events. It's done basically nothing on TTS though. On the flip side of that, I still think they're going to be on the board a lot. I still think they're going to be out there catching people out, beating you. They play in a really, really, really unique way that you want to be prepared for. So there's a lot to break down in them, you know, a lot to swat up on and make sure that you know about them, know how to beat them, because I do think these are going to be on the tables.
Yeah, and you know, I think this number 5 slot here could have been a number of different things, and you know, we did chat over like the first 3 things on this list were pretty obvious. Number 4 was also definitely going to be there somewhere as well in Daughters of Khaine. But, you know, this one, you could have just gone and picked an out-and-out more powerful army. Like, we could have just said Fire Slayers because you can't beat them in melee, or we could have said Tzeentch because, you know, they're just so generally powerful. But those armies are not quite as popular on the tabletop, or you don't see them as much as this, I don't think. We saw a lot of Tzeentch when they were, like, suddenly unbeatable for 2 weeks, but that's a slightly different situation. But Kharadron Overlords
are the army that's dropped off. Tzeentch has dropped off throughout. You know, at the start of lockdown, I would have been like Kharadron Overlords, Tzeentch. You're going to see them everywhere. They would have been, if we were going to rank these armies, they may would have been higher up the rankings, but they've dropped off loads through that period. You know, some of these armies, particularly Lumineth Realmlords that's appeared, I think has really give those two a knock. So
yeah. So I mean, Kharadron Overlords, amazing hobby army again. You know, and you can see that. You can just see just how important hobby is to what happens in tournaments as well, because it does make an impact. You know, like, it might not make an impact for a very small percentage of players who would only play the best thing, but for most people, very few people, even who are playing at the top level, don't care about hobby. You know, people care about hobby. It matters. And so these are a great army. They're an army that's been around for a long time. A lot of people own them as well. A lot of people have painted them as hobby projects, etc. But yeah, like, the thing about these is they might not be
army.
Yeah.
That's easy to move around the board, quick to move around the board. You know, say you've got 50 guys in it, you're often only moving.
Yeah. They're certainly not in the S or maybe tier 1 tier that the other 4 armies are. You know, I think these are probably tier 2 if we were really being, you know, strict about what you call a higher tier army. Yeah. But they can do things that interact with the top level armies. They can deploy on the very back of the board where even those armies are out of range turn 1. They can jump around a lot to avoid things. They've got shooting to take out the key pieces that drive some of those armies. They've got volume of shots enough to kill things like skinks, etc. So that they do a lot of the things that can give you ways to beat those armies. And like Richie said before, you know, people like to feel clever. People like to take these armies that give you options. But then they're also just very good. Where they do become more powerful, I guess, is when you play against a lot of the armies that are sort of like middle of the road. They tend to be slower or not have the output, and just often just can't interact with Kharadron Overlords. You know, when you teleport at your max range with your Kharadron Overlords boat from something and shoot it, a lot of the time people just can't get to you in their turn. And you know, these would be higher if they weren't so dependent on that, like that ability to do that, and how the double turns fall, which can maybe lose or win you a game for Kharadron Overlords off the bat. They would be much higher, but you know, certainly they're going to be around a lot. And if you're choosing armies and you don't choose an army that can interact with these, you're going to probably, like you say, polar more than any other army maybe. If you don't have a way to interact with these, you just cannot win the game.
Yeah. If you have very little or zero knowledge of this army as well, you could say zero knowledge about, you know, any army, you know, you get beat by something you don't know what it does. So let's say you've probably got like a lower knowledge of this army. They really, you know, will jump all over you. Absolutely. I think the priority role is big for them as well. There will be situations that both players can't avoid. You know, it's just where they double you and they win. You know, because they've shot
even
you.
The top armies, you know, even if you are playing Seraphon or Daughters of Khaine or Lumineth or whatever, you get double turned by these, it's definitely a bad time, like as it is against any shooting army. Likewise, on the flip side, if you double turn them, you're probably just going to win the game a lot of the time. You know, so it's
the other armies in the list, I've beat them all with Kharadron. I've not beat Deepkin, but I've beat all the other ones.
Particularly bad case, I think that, isn't it?
Yeah, particularly bad. Yeah, an army that I can only shoot the closest target, ignores me round, and is fast enough to catch me wherever I am on the battlefield. Pretty tough. I'm going to play off the board. Nightmare. So, but like that plays into the Kharadron thing. Like, it's hard to go to an event with the Kharadron and look and think, how am I going to get past Deepkin? You know, but it doesn't put everyone off, because big part of this game is, guys, you know, you go into events. Ian mentioned it before, say there's 100 people, probably 10 people there really care about, you know, what they've brought and ultimately winning the entire thing. And even less of those people care about winning and will bring any models they can get their hand on, right? You know, even the best players, particularly Age of Sigmar, because it's such a good community and the hobby is such a big deal. People like to go with their own models that they spend time when they've painted, you know, that they want to show off as well. So there's probably like 1 or 2 guys at an entire event who will bring any old thing they can get their hands on to just min-max that best list. You know, events aren't about that. You know, there's a lot more to it than the numbers. But, you know, the numbers are the numbers. Like, not trying to knock that.
I think it's interesting, you know, while we're on that point as well, to say that when we were talking about what we were going to talk about in this episode, we were going to do top 10 armies. Yeah. We were thinking about maybe talking about the top 10 armies. But when you look at the list of armies in Age of Sigmar that are currently playable, there's 14, in my opinion. I won't list them all off, but there's 14 armies in Age of Sigmar that are currently playable, which is tier 2 and above, pretty much.
Sure.
And if you do top 10, that's like almost all the playable armies, and that's really wide. You know, that's really great.
Good, that's good.
And, you know, the game, as it's gone on over the last year or two particularly, has really, really improved in the list of playable things. And, you know, like Richie says, he's beaten all of these top armies except Deepkin with Kharadron Overlords. And, you know, they're a tier 2 army, but he's beaten things with them. And all these armies can do well. So, yes, and this is why it's important to look at a top 5, because if you look at this as a top 5, I would say there's a very good chance that in any given event you're going to play 3 of these. Mm-hmm. You know, it's almost certainly you're going to play 2 of these matchups in every event, and there's a very good chance it's going to be 3. So, looking at these top 5 armies, these are the ones that you prepare for. The other good thing is, in preparing for these 5 armies, you actually also prepare for a bunch of other armies as well. You know, like, if you can go through the brick that is Daughters of Khaine Hagnar, you've also got some game against Fire Slayers.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're similar in a lot of ways. Like, Daughters of Khaine are very difficult to kill, and you don't really ideally want to be in melee with them because they can go in the combat phase and they're just very good in melee. They're very similar to Fire Slayers in a lot of ways like that. So if you're prepped for Daughters of Khaine, you've also got some natural prepping there as well. For example, you know, similarly, Ossiarch Bone Reapers, you know, you're also prepped for dealing with things that are very difficult to kill. So whilst these might be the top 5 armies, they cover a lot of the things that are very good in Age of Sigmar. And if you prep for these, you're in a good position for playing against anything else as well that is likely to be good.
That's boss. Well, guys, that brings us to the end of our video. Look, I've said it before. If you liked it, please give us a like. What did you think of our top 5? Leave it in the comments. Tell us what you think. What would be your 5 armies that you need to beat in Age of Sigmar in 2021? And of course, if you want to support us, please visit justplaygames.uk, where you can pick up all your Warhammer, all your Age of Sigmar, Warhammer 40,000, and tons of hobby supplies as well. But most of all, we're really looking forward to getting back to tournaments in 2021. We can't wait to see you out there at events. So please come and say hello. We can chat about all this and more. Thanks very much for watching, guys.
Bye-bye.